Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach. Former President Donald Trump is back in court for new testimony in his New York criminal trial. You may recall this case is related to allegations that he falsified business documents to cover up hush money payments to an adult film actor during his 2016 run for office. Trump is facing 34 felony counts. He's denying all charges. His longtime friend and the former head of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, is providing testimony about how he attempted to squash stories before they became public. I want to bring back in now CBS News national correspondent Errol Barnett. He's there outside of the courthouse in Manhattan. So, Errol, since we last spoke, David Pecker has discussed Stormy Daniels specifically. What did he have to say?
Lana, I've just stepped outside the courtroom as David Pecker continues his very specific testimony now as it relates to Karen McDougal. And what we're getting, what the jury is seeing, is the connective glue between Donald Trump and the mistresses in this arrangement, the alleged mistresses, I should say. What David Pecker just explained was that after an agreement was hatched that Karen McDougal's story would be paid for in order to kill it, he was invited to the White House in early 2018 for what Donald Trump described as a thank you dinner. And Mr. Pecker arrived with some of his business associates. He noted that Jared Kushner and that Sean Spicer were in the Oval Office when he was there, at which point Donald Trump walked him from the Oval Office along the Rose Garden to a dining area where Donald Trump asked him, "How is Karen doing?" Interestingly enough, the prosecution then showed a black and white image of Trump and Pecker walking along the Rose Garden to back up that narrative. He then went on to explain that after it was made public via an article in the Wall Street Journal that Michael Cohen had paid Stormy Daniels $130,000 of this so-called hush money. And a few months later, when Karen McDougal spoke to Anderson Cooper on CNN, Donald Trump reached out to Pecker to ask, what's going on? And I can kind of share with you an exchange that Pecker detailed to the jury in which Trump called him and said, "Did you see that CNN interview?" Pecker said, "Yes." And then Trump asked, "I thought we had an agreement. She can't do interviews or appear in the media." This is a rough transcript I'm sharing. To which Pecker said, "Yes, but I amended that agreement because she was being flooded with requests and I wanted to allow her to speak somewhat." And then Trump said, "So you paid her?" And he described Trump as being upset, and he really couldn't believe it. And so if we think back to those articles, it was the first time that these allegations were made public. Pecker is explaining on the stand how he tried to amend the agreement with Karen McDougal in order to allow her to speak. And I'm coming outside now to kind of update you on all of that as that testimony continues. So for the jury, it's fleshing out the connection between the allegations, Donald Trump's direction, Donald Trump checking in with Pecker, and Pecker's explanation of how he was trying to appease all parties here. So kind of added meat on the bones, so to speak, for the jury and their understanding of how this all unfolded.
So, Errol, any sense of how Trump is responding to Pecker's testimony?
I've got to tell you, Lana, it's remarkable to see a former president in the front row, his red tie, his trademark suit. He was slouched back in his chair, his eyes seeming to close or really kind of be squinted. He is engaged. He's speaking with his lawyers, and he was listening to Pecker. No real animated response. But, of course, we heard from Trump this morning say publicly when he was visiting a construction site here in Midtown Manhattan, where he was asked what he thinks of Pecker's testimony, and he was basically saying he's a good guy. That was the crux of the prosecution, adding evidence to what they say are continued violations of Trump to the Judge Warren Merchant's gag order. So Donald Trump not really being animated or showing a response during his testimony, but saying positive things about him publicly.
Well, on that gag order point, Errol, do we know when the judge is expected to issue the latest ruling related to the gag order?
It's unclear. The judge really holding his cards close to his chest. We know that the prosecution initially said there had been 10 violations. They then this morning added 4 additional from this week because Donald Trump did a radio interview, because he's speaking. The comments he even says in the hallway as he enters and exits the courtroom. And the judge has 3 options: verbal warning, financial fine, or putting him, detaining him for some days. We don't expect that to be the case, but he's not yet decided.
And Errol, real quick, there's also developments from a federal judge on that defamation case against Carroll. Bring our viewers up to date on that.
That's right. If you remember, not too long ago, a jury found Donald Trump liable for defamation and had ordered him to pay some $83 million plus to the writer E. Jean Carroll, who had claimed sexual assault, which a separate jury found Trump liable for, and claimed that Trump had continued to defame her. Another jury found that that was the case. Trump tried to appeal that decision and wanted that case tried again. The judge, Judge Lewis Kaplan, a federal judge here in the Southern District, said that that wouldn't happen, that it's not factual based on the law or the facts. And Alina Habba, who represented Trump in that case, has said they're going to kick it up to a circuit court. But what's noteworthy and the connective glue between that case and this one is Judge Juan Merchan has allowed the prosecution, should Donald Trump take the stand, which he said he would, but he might change his mind, he's allowed the prosecution to include some of the rulings in that civil case as it relates to Trump's violations of certain things. And so it will be a big deal, of course, if a former president takes the stand, but it leaves him open to questioning and cross-examination as it relates to some of these other judgments. So a lot happening today.
Errol Barnett outside of the Trump criminal hearing courthouse. Errol, thanks.